He said it plainly, the way he said everything. No excess, no softness. I don't need a companion. I need someone to be here when Rosie gets home from school. Dora Ashby had just stepped down from the wagon with her trunk and her carpet bag and 4 days of travel still settled in her bones. And she looked at him, and then at the little girl standing very still in the doorway behind him, and she said, "Then I'll be here, Mr. Connelly." She paused. "But when I stopped at the post office in Dunmore just now, the woman there told me the school's been closed since September. No teacher." She looked at him. "Rosie's told you she goes every day." He went very still. "She told me she goes every day," he said. Dora looked at the child in the doorway. The child looked back at her, 8 years old, dark-haired, wearing a dress that was clean but too short at the wrists. Her expression was not the expression of a child caught in a lie. It was the expression of a child who had been waiting for a very long time, for someone to notice and wasn't sure yet whether to be relieved or terrified that someone finally had. "I know," Dora said quietly. "That's what I'd like to understand." That was how it began. Not with love, not even with warmth, but with one small lie sitting in the middle of a household like a stone in a boot, and a woman who had learned, the hard way, to hear what children mean when they can't say what they mean. Subscribe to Rusty Love and follow this story all the way to its end. Drop a comment right now. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this one travels. The letter had come to Dora in Columbus, Ohio in the 3rd week of October, addressed in handwriting so upright and controlled it looked almost mechanical. She was 28 years old, 3 years out of the county teaching certificate program, and living in a rented room above a milliner's shop on 5th Street. She had taught at 2 schools in the last 4 years. The first had closed when the district lost its funding. The second had sent her off at year's end with a polite letter explaining they preferred a male instructor for the older students. She had read Wade Connelly's letter twice at the kitchen table where her landlady left the mail. "I am writing on behalf of an agency in Cheyenne. I have a daughter, Rosie, age 8. Her mother passed 3 years ago. I run a horse ranch outside Dunmore in Wyoming territory. The work is not easy and the winters are not mild. What I require is someone capable and steady who can keep the house and be present for my daughter. I am not a man of promises. What I can offer is honest circumstances and fair treatment. If that is acceptable, write back. W. Connelly." She had written back the same evening. She was practical enough to understand what the arrangement was, and honest enough not to dress it otherwise. Her mother was 4 years gone. Her father had remarried and moved to Michigan. Her younger sister was settled in Pennsylvania with a husband and 2 small children, and a life that fit her like a coat made to measure. Dora's life fit her like a coat made for someone slightly taller, slightly less particular. Someone who had not spent 12 years caring more about other people's children than about building anything of her own. The train from Columbus to Cheyenne took 3.5 days. From Cheyenne, a stage to a junction she would not remember the name of, then a hired wagon north to Dunmore. She used the journey to revise her expectations downward to something manageable. Not love, not ease, a household that needed organizing and a child who needed steadiness. Those were things she knew how to provide. She had not prepared herself for the particular quality of Wade Connelly's silence. He was 41, taller than she'd imagined, with weathered skin and hands that showed 30 years of physical labor, and eyes a kind of gray-brown that didn't offer much. He met the wagon in the yard the way a man meets something he has arranged and intends to be reasonable about, without warmth but without hostility. He shook her hand when she offered it, held it briefly, let go. "You made good time," he said. "The stage was on schedule," she said. He nodded, picked up her trunk without being asked, and carried it to the house. She followed, and that was when she saw Rosie, in the doorway, thin-wristed, dark-eyed, wearing the careful eschin that Dora would come to understand was the girl's default setting in those early weeks, a performance of calm, the specific stillness of a child who has decided that being no trouble is the safest way to remain present. The house was clean but hollow, not neglected. Wade Connelly was clearly a man who kept things in order, but order and life are not the same thing, and these rooms had the quality of a place where life had been quietly organized out of the way. No curtains on the front windows. The kitchen table had 3 chairs pushed evenly beneath it, none pulled out, as though the habit of sitting together had simply discontinued. On the mantel above the fireplace, 3 photographs in oval frames, a young woman with dark hair, the same woman holding an infant, all three of them together, Wade younger, that woman smiling at his side, a toddler in his arms. Dora did not look at the photographs too long. She set her carpet bag down in the middle of the kitchen and said, "Where would you like me to start supper?" The first week was a study in careful distance. Wade rose before light and was in the barn before she had the stove going. He came in for meals, ate steadily, said little. Rosie sat across from Dora at supper each evening and answered every question with the shortest possible honest statement. "Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's fine, ma'am." She was, Dora recognized, an exceptionally good child. Too good. The kind of good that takes concentration. The kind of good that means something else is being held in very careful check. Dora watched her the way she had always watched her students, not intrusively, just attentively, the way you watch a plant to understand what it needs. What she saw troubled her. Rosie was not unhappy in any visible way. She cleared her plate without being asked. She folded her napkin correctly. She said thank you and good night at the right times. The performance was flawless. That was exactly what troubled Dora. She had spent 4 years in classrooms, and she had never once met a genuinely flawless 8-year-old. Children that age were supposed to be imprecise, occasionally inconvenient, full of opinions that arrived without invitation. Rosie's precision was not the precision of a child who was all right. It was the precision of a child who had been practicing. The lie about school was only the first thing Dora found. In the second week, looking for writing paper, she opened the wrong drawer in the small desk in the parlor and found a reader. A McGuffey's Third, the cover worn soft with use, a name written in the looping hand of an adult. Rosie Connelly, from her mother, January 1883. Below the inscription, in a child's clumsy, uneven print, "I love you, Mom." And below that, in the same adult handwriting but smaller, a line that appeared later than the rest, "I love you too, my sweet girl, always." Dora closed the book. She sat with it in her lap for a long moment. Then she put it back exactly where she'd found it and went to start supper without saying a word. She waited. She was not sure yet what she was waiting for, only that the right moment would announce itself. It came from a direction she did not expect. It came from Harold Sperling. She had been in Dunmore collecting provisions when she heard the words the Connelly woman spoken behind her at the dry goods counter. She turned to find a heavy-set man in his 50s with the bearing of someone long accustomed to being deferred to. Sperling. Wade had mentioned the name exactly once. In the flat way he mentioned things he considered settled. "Sperling runs the land north of mine." He and Catherine were cousins. Distant ones. Sperling looked at her with an expression that was not impolite, but was assessing in a way she did not like. "You're the woman Connelly sent for," he said. "Dora Ashby," she said. "Yes. I hope you know what you're walking into." He didn't say it cruelly. That was almost worse. "Wade is a decent enough man, but he's been somewhere else for 3 years. That child deserves better than a house where the person who loves her most isn't present enough to notice she's struggling. I filed a petition with the district court 6 weeks ago requesting a formal guardianship review." He looked at her steadily. "The hearing's in 3 weeks. A court assessor will visit the ranch. I'd prepare yourself." She paid for her provisions and walked to the wagon and sat without immediately picking up the reins. 3 weeks. Wade had said nothing. She drove home and said nothing at supper. But after Rosie had gone to bed, she went to the barn door where Wade's lantern was burning and stood in the opening. "Mr. Connelly," she said, "tell me about the Sperling petition." He didn't stop what he was doing for a moment. Then he set down the brush and turned. "Who told you?" he said. "Sperling himself. In town." She kept her voice even, because even was the most useful thing she had. "A court assessor is coming in 3 weeks. And your daughter has been lying to you about school for 6 weeks, which means she has been spending every day alone in this house or in the yard, and you didn't know because she didn't want you to worry. That is not a problem being handled, Mr. Connelly. That is a little girl doing the work of protecting an adult from information that adult should have." He was completely still. "She told you that," he said. "She didn't have to," Dora said. "I used to teach. I know what it looks like when a child has decided that being small and quiet is how she stays safe." She watched his face. "Rosie isn't unhappy in the way that shows. But she's lonely in a way that has been going on a long time, and she doesn't believe she's allowed to say so. That is what Sperling is going to tell a judge." Wade Connelly looked at the floor of the barn for a long time. "Come inside," he said finally. "I'll make coffee." They sat at the kitchen table for the first time without a meal to give the evening its shape, and he told her what he hadn't before. Catherine had died of a fever in the fall of 1885. Rosie had been 5 years old. In the months after, Wade had run the ranch the way a man runs something when running it, is the only alternative to collapsing, completely, mechanically, without space for anything that wasn't immediate and necessary. He had kept Rosie fed, clothed, safe. He had not understood. The words came slowly, the way something heavy lifts, that safe and present are not the same thing. "She never cried," he said, "after Catherine died. Not once that I saw. I thought that meant she was managing." Dora was quiet for a moment. "Children don't cry when they don't believe there's anyone to cry to," she said. "They wait until they're sure someone can hold it." He looked at her. "Has she cried? With you?" "Not yet," Dora said, "but she will when she trusts I won't disappear." He said nothing for a long time. He drank his coffee and looked at the table. "What do we do?" he said at last. "We give the assessor something true to report," she said. "Not performed. True. Rosie needs to start speaking honestly about how she feels, and you need to be someone she can speak to. I can help with the household, routine, structure, the visible things a court looks for. But the part with Rosie is yours. Nobody else can do it." He nodded once. "All right," he said. It was not a simple 10 days. Dora started a school session at the kitchen table each morning. 2 hours, reading and arithmetic, no exceptions. Rosie came to it with the same careful precision she brought to everything, and by the 4th day had begun, tentatively, to offer opinions about how a problem was worded, about a passage in the reader she found unfair to its characters. Small opinions cautiously offered, but opinions, proof that something in the girl was starting to believe it was permitted. Wade was harder. He was not a man who had practiced sitting without a purpose and learning to spend evenings simply present with Rosie, not working, not useful, just there and asking questions that had no practical answer, cost him something visible each time. Dora watched it from a distance and said nothing, because some things have to be attempted without an audience. The breaking point came on a Thursday, 10 days before the hearing. She came in from the yard to find Rosie at the kitchen table, with the McGuffey's reader open in front of her, not reading, just sitting with her hand flat on the page where her mother's handwriting was. She looked up when Dora came in, and her expression was entirely different from the practiced calm of the first weeks. It was the expression of a child who had run completely out of the energy it takes to appear fine. Dora sat down across from her. She didn't say anything immediately, she just sat. And Rosie said in a voice that was very quiet and very careful, "Do you think Mr. Sperling is going to take me away from Daddy?" "I think," Dora said, "that no judge in Wyoming is going to take a little girl from her father unless something is genuinely wrong. Is something genuinely wrong?" The girl was quiet for a long time. Her hand moved slightly against the page. "Daddy doesn't know I'm sad," she said. "I didn't want him to get sadder." "How long have you been keeping that?" Dora asked. "Since Mama died," Rosie said. And then without drama, without any warning, she started to cry. Not the sharp, sudden tears of a child startled into it, but the slow, serious tears of someone releasing something that had been compressed into a very small space for a very long time. Dora did not move to stop it. She pulled her chair around the table and sat close and put her hand on the girl's back and let it happen. It took a long time. When it was over, Rosie wiped her face with the back of her wrist and said, "I thought if I was good enough, nobody else would leave." Dora thought about that, about all the children she'd taught who had worked out the same calculation. The specific arithmetic of childhood grief that says, if I am small enough, quiet enough, no trouble enough, the people I love will stay. The answer was always wrong. The variables were always wrong, but the children kept calculating. "Being good doesn't make people stay," Dora said. "Sometimes people leave no matter how good you are, and it is never because of you." She held Rosie's gaze. "And sometimes people come. That's also not about whether you earned it. It's just what happens." Rosie looked at her. "Did you come because I was good?" "I came because your father wrote a letter," Dora said. "I stayed because you're worth staying for." That evening she heard them on the porch. Wade and Rosie, sitting together after supper for the first time since Dora had arrived. She couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm. His low, even voice, then her smaller one, then a pause, then both at once, then silence. Then Rosie's laugh, not the polite, controlled laugh of the past weeks, but something looser, surprised. A laugh that came from somewhere that hadn't been open in a long time. Dora stood at the kitchen window with a dish towel in her hands and let herself feel the full weight of what she was hearing. Then she put the towel down and went back to work. The hearing was held in the Dunmore County Courthouse on a gray November morning. The assessor's report, submitted 3 days prior, had noted a structured daily household routine, consistent educational activity for the minor child, and visible positive attachment between the child and both the father and the current domestic partner. Harold Sperling's attorney argued that 3 weeks was an insufficient window to establish a stable environment. Judge Callum Bryce, a deliberate man in his 60s who had been presiding over family matters in Dunmore County for 2 decades, listened to all of it with the same expression, attentive, revealing nothing. Then he asked Rosie to come forward. Dora had asked her that morning, helping her with her buttons, whether she was frightened. Rosie had thought about it the way she thought about things now. Actually thought, instead of performing the thinking. "I'm going to tell the truth," she'd said. "You said the truth is easier to remember." "It usually is," Dora had said. Rosie stood before the judge and answered his questions in a voice that was small but level. She talked about the kitchen table lessons. She said she missed her mother. She said it the way a child says something she has recently been given permission to say aloud. Carefully, seriously, without apology. The judge asked her one final question. "Are you all right, Rosie?" A pause that lasted just long enough for Dora to stop breathing. "I'm getting more all right," Rosie said. "I wasn't before, but I am now." The judge looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his papers. Harold Sperling's petition was denied. The Connelly household was found to be a stable and suitable environment for the minor child. The record would note that the introduction of a consistent adult female presence had meaningfully supported the child's demonstrated well-being. Outside on the courthouse steps in the thin November light, Wade stood beside Dora while Rosie ran ahead to where Mick had the wagon waiting. He didn't speak for a moment. "She said she wasn't all right before," he said. "Yes." "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," Dora said. "That's part of why I'm here." He turned to look at her. The gray-brown eyes that had offered nothing in the beginning were not the same eyes now. She had learned to read them the way she had always learned to read people. Slowly, imperfectly, with genuine attention. "What you did," he said. "What you found. What you gave her." "What she already had," Dora said. "I just made room for it." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know how to say what I mean to say." "You don't have to say it today," she said. "Yes, I do." He looked at her steadily. "I wrote that letter because the agency said I needed a solution. Because Sperling was circling and Rosie was growing up now. Everything good had gone quiet and I didn't know how to fix it and didn't know I was the reason it was broken." He paused. "I didn't write that letter expecting anything like this." "I know," she said. "But it is," he said simply. "It is something. It is a great deal more than something." He extended his hand, not the brief businesslike handshake from the day she'd arrived, but a hand held out and waiting. She took it. He held it the way she'd noticed him holding it inside the courtroom when the ruling was read. Not tightly, not urgently, just with the deliberate steadiness of a man who has decided to stop releasing things he wants to keep. Below them, Rosie was waving from the wagon, her arms moving wide and unguarded, a child in full motion, a child recently returned to herself. "Let's go home," he said. "Yes," she said. And she meant it the way you mean a thing when you have finally stopped pretending it is less than it is. The winter settled in the way Wyoming winters do, long and cold and in their own way generous, the way hard seasons sometimes are, pressing people into the same rooms around the same fire, making the ordinary act of being present feel like something that mattered. By February, Rosie had finished the 3rd reader and begun the 4th. She had also started crying when she needed to, which Dora counted as the more significant achievement. She cried when she missed her mother, and she said so out loud, and Wade sat with her when she did, which was its own education for both of them. One evening in April, when the first real warmth had returned to the air, and the horses were restless in the paddock, Rosie was asleep, and Dora was on the porch with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, watching the last light drain from the mountains. Wade came out and sat in the other chair, the chair that had been empty all winter, but had not really felt empty for a long time. "I want to ask you something," he said. "All right." He looked out at the mountains, same direction she was looking. "We did this the wrong way around. The letter, the arrangement, the legal reason for all of it. I asked you here out of necessity, and you came out of practicality, and somewhere in the middle of a Wyoming winter, it stopped being only that." "Yes," she said, "it did." He turned to look at her. "I want to do this right, not an arrangement." He paused. "Will you stay?" Dora looked at him, at the man who had written a letter without warmth or flourish, and had received her without welcome, and had slowly and honestly become someone she would not choose to leave, at the house behind them where a little girl was sleeping with her reader on the nightstand, and her mother's inscription inside the cover, and enough room in her chest now for both the grief and the good, both at once, the way it actually works when you finally let it. "I'm already staying," she said, "but yes." He exhaled, slow, long, deeper than the body's ordinary need for air. The photographs on the mantel would stay where they were. They would always stay. Some things needed to remain exactly where they were. Dora had never touched them and would not. But the curtains were on the windows now, the kind her mother had taught her to sew, and at supper the 3 chairs were pulled out from the table and kept that way, every evening, without anyone having to decide. Subscribe to Rusty Love and drop a comment right now. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far a story like this one can travel. Outside, the April stars were out in their full Wyoming numbers, enormous and indifferent and equally generous across the dark, the way they had always been, the way they would always be, holding grief and joy and stubborn ordinary love under the sky without making any distinction between them at all. Inside, the fire was burning,